I started in equities, sales and trading, stocks, basically. And that was really interesting. But by now, I'm not the best or good in equity or stock trading because my interest is now with blockchain technology. I can make a much better risk assessment on a crypto project than on an equity, although you would say it's the more risky asset class, right? But within this asset class, it's easier for me to even detect a low risk activity.
Quick disclaimer before you listen to this episode, this is for education and entertainment purposes only. Anything communicated in this episode is not professional financial advice. Neither me nor my guest Romina are professional financial advisors in my knowledge. Having said that, my today's guest is Romina, the ex-CFO of Centrifuge. She talks about all things investing in blockchain, use cases of DeFi, DAOs, and also the regulatory landscape that comes with crypto. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. My name is Diksha, and you are listening to Web3 Quest. Hello, Romina. Welcome to Web3 Quest. How are you?
Fine. Thanks for inviting me. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm so glad we are finally able to do this after all the back and forth. So I know you personally, but people who are not aware, tell us, who are you and how did you land up into Web3?
Yeah, sure. Romina Bungert. I was until recently CFO of Centrifuge Network Foundation that has been supporting the development of a lending protocol. And I'm in the blockchain space since 2017. My background is more in capital markets and fintech, but I was intrigued about the potential of blockchain technology for financial transactions, payments, but obviously also in the context of central bank interventions and monetary policy. So a few topics that are also still relevant today. And my focus was always on tokenized securities, or also what some call digital assets, but mostly something that already existed in the fintech world, but to make it more efficient with the distributed ledger technology.
So what is it that makes you a believer or excites you about like Web3 in general, and what area in Web3 are you focusing on at present?
Yeah. So next to the general fascination about certain finance topics or how capital markets work or financial products and derivatives, I think blockchain technology is really impactful because it has the potential to also serve people that don't have access to financial transactions, or to protect their savings from hyperinflation when speaking of emerging markets, or some countries that are have financial struggles, and also to give access to wealth creating products. And I think that is really the massive potential here. And also, to make financial transactions a human right in the context that we have a credible, neutral transaction layer that is not political, right? Because I think often financial transactions are used to punish people, or politicians or politics of a certain government. And it actually is so far reaching that it excludes so many citizens that are not directly connected to misdoings. And I think that's a critical point. And I think in the context of the Russian and the Ukraine war, where a lot of contributions came from the Web3 space that were able to directly support the Ukrainian government, I think that was really powerful to see.
Yeah.
Potential.
I'm glad you gave this example. But since someone who's worked in DeFi, if you really have to sort of look at the last 2-3 years, what do you think are the use cases that you would say are most successful in DeFi? And which are the ones you would say can do better, or there is potential for these future use cases?
Yeah. So I think one use case that's not necessarily DeFi, but definitely blockchain-based transactions, obviously remittance. I think it's still one of the most relevant use cases where you can really, help people make efficient transactions between different currencies, or, as we just talked about, also the struggles of emerging markets. It's still huge, and I think there have been many countries where crypto exchanges or on and off ramps were able to support people with their local struggles in a very efficient manner. So that's not directly DeFi as per its definition. But I think there are also many innovations around specific products, but also broader solutions. I mean, some are, for example, stable coins and like a decentralized central bank, but also concepts where you can generate a yield in a way that is very efficient, where you can, for example, stake your funds, like with liquid staking, and you get a liquidity position that you can still use while you earn a yield. I mean, these are great inventions. They also come with certain challenges, obviously. And there are many risks also still about certain technologies. For example, there are still smart contract risks, vulnerabilities for hackers, obviously, to attack single points of failures, everything that's connected to multi-chain bridges. So everything where something has to go through one little loophole, or, as I just said, a single point of failure, are definitely a risk. And especially when it comes to very complex products or schemes where, like, for an everyday user, the actual underlying risk is not directly visible or easy to assess. And there are big differences between some DeFi projects, let's say in terms of lending protocols, some that actually use securitized setups and others that use unsecuritized setups. And there's like a big difference between the risk assessment of which projects get a lending position, and if the money is possible to come back, right? And what happens if the money doesn't come back? Do you have recourse, right, or not? And I think this is something that's not always so visible, and it's a challenge for many users that are not professional players or experienced with financial products to see those smaller differences.
Oh, nice.
So there's a lot of educational work required.
But what can I do as a user to be careful?
I think there's a certain mentality between in the degen space, I would say. And what we mean with degens are basically those very crypto forward people that are very comfortable with experimenting and gambling with a certain amount of funds that are not critical to them. Maybe sometimes it is their whole network, but they call it aping, right? Like they ape on different projects and say, there's a new project, it offers a high yield. When you set up a validator, or when you provide the first funds in the liquidity pool, and those automated market making functions create solutions, but they're also really, really risky. And the risk can also change from one day to another. And to be able to monitor these activities is something that is, something a user should be able to assess. So I think just following another tip is not like a tip of a friend, right? Like it can work if you are comfortable with like this financial risk budget, maybe also the emotional risk budget behind like having your funds at risk. But I think there are many solutions where you can actually dive pretty deep. Many media houses in the Web3 space that introduce these projects and show differences and really take some time before you invest your funds or move your money, to see a bit about, maybe also do some due diligence about the teams behind it. Sometimes there are projects where some of the people involved have already worked on other projects where customer funds have been wiped out. And there is a certain track record, right? And there are also people that obviously are attracted by the blockchain space because you can make money quite easily. So, I think there's still the relevance to do this integrity check. We're so early in this space. As I always call it, we're still in the experimentation phase, right? And obviously there are also many different people with many different motivations or integrity sets. So I think really using the time to dive deep, maybe also ask questions, go to a Discord forum, and then sense a bit what type of answers do you get to some questions that you have, and how well thought through is it, can give you a good sense check.
Yeah, I think even though there are high returns, and with that also comes more due diligence for users, right? It's not as simple as S&P 500 where you just put your money. And
yeah, exactly.
So,
and also because it's not regulated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't trust a certain authority to oversee.
Yes. So I think I'm curious, with your professional background and the knowledge you have, when you join a project or you're consulting on a project, what is the kind of advice, or what is your role? What is the kind of guidance you can offer to a Web3 project?
So what I usually do is that I'm involved quite early on, from when it comes to making or putting an idea into place and bringing it live. So thinking about a business model that is maybe very novel, maybe also in a regulated context, and to see where it actually requires a license, or where you can actually innovate so that it's truly decentralized and maybe no license requirements are applicable. These are topics that I am really passionate about. And I think that also some projects don't spend a lot of time about. So often I think there are teams that are motivated to find the least regulated approach, but it maybe it isn't always the best approach for the user or the project. So I think avoiding regulation by all means is maybe not in every context the right approach, even if we have certain crypto anarchist motivations that come from painful learnings in the capital markets, from financial crises. I understand all that. But next to bringing the operations on the street and supporting different teams to grow and to deliver, that's what I usually do. But also managing investor relations and really help getting a feeling of what are the right investors that you need to support your projects, because there are obviously smart money and not so smart money investors. And I think with building this cap table and selecting for the also maybe the token distribution, the ecosystem, who you involve and how you incentivize those people or the relevant actors in your ecosystem, right? In a DeFi space, this ecosystem is so much more important than if you just sell a standard product where you really focus on your user and you bring returns to your investors, right? And I think in DeFi, it's all those different actor groups are activated or can be activated in a more meaningful way. Governance, obviously one of the key topics where it becomes relevant that you really have token holders on board that can help you govern and steer a project in the right direction, especially when it's a truly decentralized project or DAO where also all funds are administrated on chain, and you have to take care that the people possess a certain expertise to help navigate in the best direction, and are not only motivated by quick returns
Oh my God, that sounds like a lot of work, like all the stages that you explained. So I'm going to like break it down in terms of my understanding, right? I think one of the things you mentioned was also like taking care of the regulatory aspect. So we are in Europe, and as far as my knowledge goes, it's sort of ahead in terms of regulation when it comes to blockchain. Want to really know your views in terms of where we are in terms of regulation, and what can we expect? Like at a broader level, how would you explain it 101 to me?
Yeah. So I think the difference to the regulatory landscape to like a few years ago, let's say the phase when Ethereum started and the big ICO token sales craze from 2017 that we remember it happened, there was no regulation. And regulators also often refuse to make statements if something requires a license or not, and regulated rather by enforcement, how we still see it in the US, because the technology was very novel. It was not clear how big this market or how relevant it would be. So even if there was like considerable transactions moving or amounts, it was fairly small compared to nowadays market capitalization of the overall blockchain space of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all these DAOs and their super big billion treasuries. So now I think we can see that regulators, or in general, like the financial markets, take the blockchain space serious enough to see them as relevant to develop the guidance, regulatory guidance, or work on this. And this requires like the activation and education of large teams at these banking authorities or supervisory authorities, right? It's a huge investment also. And I think it's a very positive signal that in Germany or in Europe especially, they have now developed the guidance and policies that apply over all those different member states, right? And this makes it quite groundbreaking because it's not only a single individual country, because you actually need kind of a consensus to scale a project when it's because many projects have also like a hybrid component where some part can be super decentralized, but let's say you want to approach a customer in his native language, let's say German, means you would need to clarify if your activity and the services you provide in the German market would be subject to regulation, even though there might be like a partly decentralized component, but maybe there's like a bit more, direct service offering from a closer circle of people to the German market, and you would end up in regulatory requirements. And in general, I think that's okay. When it comes to consumer protection, I think there are certain advantages. I don't agree with all the different proposals that have been made by the European Commission, but I think to have this clarity and also the commitment from the authorities to collaborate and to have like this dialogue is very good, because that is something that we obviously miss in the US. Many have seen like the struggles with the SEC that don't really communicate how they would register or how the license requirements would be, and do it only on a case-by-case basis. And it's actually quite harmful when you think about like the citizens, the US citizens and their consumer protection, because the SEC ultimately loses influence to protect their users, because those projects then move to other jurisdictions or go completely decentralized, or bring certain features in a decentralized manner, such as Coinbase, that has launched next to their centralized exchange also a decentralized approach called Base. where they would be able to also offer certain services that are structured in a way where there isn't really a counterparty to regulate, right? So there, like the US consumer actually loses this protection by their supervisory authority. And I think that's something a bit problematic, and I hope that more regulatory bodies take the effort and develop like a clear enough policy that is not hostile towards innovation, but recognizes the potential for the financial infrastructure of the future.
Yeah, that's so interesting. But what do you think makes Europe more open to blockchain?
I think with the new MiCA regulation, there is a lot more clarity about how they consider decentralized projects, and also that many also recognize that if there's no central actor, then there's not like a central body to regulate. It's like a collective group of people spread around the world, and then who is responsible towards another. Like that's obviously something that many projects need, this decentralized setup, and it's great to see that they also recognize it. But if there's like a central player, and central also means opaque, right? Because the decentralized autonomous organizations, if they're really autonomous, then you can really see everything on chain. It's ultimately transparent. Governance is also very clear. And let's say with FTX, for example, there was a centralized player, but you didn't know where the funds were and if they were segregated, like the company profits from the user funds, and where they would be, or if they would be mismanaged, right? And I think here they recognize, I think, the potential of decentralized balance sheets or certain features of distributed ledger technology and permissionless setups. And also, go and dive deeper where you don't have this transparency and clarity. And I think it actually helps regulators and also auditors when they want to make their audits and analysis, that DLT technology makes it also much more efficient and actually helps mitigate certain risks.
Yeah, makes sense. When you were like talking about your, what all you can bring to the table, you also spoke about tokenomics. And I think like there is this token overflow like in the crypto industry, honestly. And I just want to understand, like, when companies or projects are looking at launching a token, what goes through their mind? Or let me ask this in a way that when do you think is actually the right time for a project to have a token? Like, I don't think every project really needs one.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of like, do you need a token? And the example that I just gave with Coinbase Base, they are going live also on Ethereum mainnet soon. And last week, I think they also confirmed again that there's no intention to launch a token. Maybe there will be something like an access token, right? It always depends on the character and the nature of your project. And sometimes you don't need to come up with like a super creative utility around a token to attract token buyers and raise funds, right? Because that's obviously often the technology that people ask about, the utility of the token, because it increases the value. But sometimes you don't need like this extra utility. And it could be, for example, tokenomics, I think, are great. And I think many projects should manage their cap table in a decentralized manner and use these technologies. So, but it doesn't ultimately result in the requirement of a native token or a new token. You can also govern without like a new token if you want to use certain governance features, but it can be if the product is a protocol, for example, and depending on like the different features of the token, and I think it can make sense, but also not every protocol needs to have their own token. And I think like a setup that we often see is that you have a governance token and you have a utility token and that came from the background of not being subject to regulation, that you tried to distribute the voting rights, because like if your share has voting rights, it would bring you closer to, like equity. And then in terms of how many investors or token holders are offered this, then you would end up into, like a public offering. And that's why during like the ICO phase, like these structures have been created to try to avoid regulation. So utility tokens, like the background was that it was trying to create it to capture some value for token holders, but that is not the equivalent to the actual shareholder values in the equity space or in the security space. So that was like the motivation of many projects. But let's say if you have we also gave you an example of liquid staking, when you stake your position and you then have a representative token, obviously, then it does make sense that you have a token, because this is exactly the innovation. You get a token that represents your liquidity that is locked up, but you can use it. So if this is the product, yes, then it makes sense.
Do you have an example of projects that don't need a token? Okay, maybe without naming, but just saying, so and so, if you are in this space, you don't need a token, but some projects in that space also have tokens.
It's hard to say, but without naming very specific.
You can take names, I mean, if you're okay.
No, I think I'm fine. I think it's really when it's just like about creating some Ponzi-like utility about a certain. I mean, there have been Ponzi schemes, right, where like
lots of them
just constantly compounded APYs, and harvested like this artificial yield. But this is a problem not only around the token and the tokenomics, but a far wider reaching problem that has to do with maybe also with integrity and certain business models in the space. So
every time I speak to you, you have a lot of you seem to have a lot of experience with DAOs, and you speak. It seems like you're a believer in the whole DAO concept. But honestly, whenever I've tried to be a part, I find it very difficult to navigate through different structures. So I think I really want to ask you that, do you feel that actually DAOs are the future of work? And if yes, what needs to be in place for that to happen?
I think allowing a group of people to collaborate on a shared mission in this decentralized and autonomous way. And autonomous would also mean with the code, right? Like that everything is fully automated, maybe also verifiable. That's super, I think, groundbreaking, and in the future allows very resilient solutions for certain problems that we now still have. I think in the context of shared ownership, it makes a lot of sense. For example, to, let's say, a listed company, right? Like where you have 100% of the shares are then distributed to many people, anonymous people, but obviously like only the top management of the company makes the decision and then reports in the yearly meetings to the rest of the shareholders. And governance is very difficult. It's hard to get the information, and not everyone is able to truly participate. And I think here are many potentials, but despite of more accessibility and maybe transparency, there's the problem still that we are so early in the development of this industry. and the technology that we're like in, I would say, kindergarten phase for governance when it comes to DAOs, because DAOs also need like best practices, like in a democracy, right? Like we have parliaments, we know how many seats we have in the parliaments. And when we elect, like, what are the best practices that all the different countries develop and fit to their geographic or cultural background, right? How they govern the country. And so for every project that is unique, and it's not always like this, it's not always possible to copy and paste certain structures, but has to be grown inherently with the people that are involved and the ecosystem. But this is obviously also noisy. And because everyone can contribute, but maybe the loudest people are not always the most knowledgeable people. There's a lot of politics. So even, let's say someone is brilliant in a certain field of software engineering, and they share their expertise, but maybe they're not so good with lobbying and convincing people. But you have to win voters, right? So it has like a highly political component. And this is obviously something that with the tools that are currently widely adopted, such as discourse forums or Snapshot, that we do have some first solutions, and there are currently also new toolings in development to address certain challenges that have been observed. But we just recently had like another governance hack. Maybe you heard about this project Tornado Cash. It's a crypto mixer that allows to anonymize transactions. It was very prominent in the news because there were allegations that it helped money laundering. So this project was obviously now not used as much anymore, and there was like a vulnerability in the code where like a hacker was able to get more voting power and overtake the token voting power of the whole DAO. Something that hasn't been so aware, because usually there was smart contract risk or the risk of bridges that bridge funds from one chain to another was clear. And these types of someone could steal funds, right? Or that was quite widespread knowledge, but the relevance of governance risk and also how which setup is necessary to also protect projects from these governance risks, not only in the code base, but there are also DAOs that use setups where you can only vote when you use a hot wallet, for example, right? And it also is a vulnerability for voting events. When you can basically, if you know who are the voters and you know they all use hot wallets, you could also attack them. So there are several aspects where I think we can further develop solutions and be more resilient, but also activating the users. Many people are not even aware that there is an open dialogue that everyone can join and that they can contribute. There's no barrier, right? Like you can just go to a discourse forum and share your opinion and also get involved. I mean, it's great, but that's what I meant with also noisy, how to navigate through if there are many loud people. Many projects also have the problem that they can't activate the users. They just want to see the token pump, but they don't want to contribute to a project. How to find people that have the relevant knowledge. For example, Centrifuge is a lending protocol dealing with private debt. It's like a very specific knowledge or expertise that you need to have a high quality contribution, right? And where in the blockchain space do you find these people that understand like the blockchain space private credit topics, right? Like it's a so niche topic, and there are many more examples like that where the people that start developing something need to find these few people in the world and get them on board and keen and motivated to contribute.
Yeah, I also think like we have a long way to go. It's also like very time consuming, but I'm sure it's rewarding at the same time. And yeah, I hope maybe I get more active in these spaces soon. Personally,
Mm.
Romina, I think I find you very inspiring because I remember this conversation in the women in blockchain meetup. We were all sitting, and you were talking about financial literacy, for women, and that conversation like really stuck with me for a very long time. And I kept thinking about it. And I am also in a lot of circles where I feel that sometimes I really can't generalize, but women start relatively a little late in terms of financial literacy. But I really want to ask you, what was your epiphany, or how did you get into understanding investments, finance, uh, and what's your personal journey in this? And if somebody who wants to start understanding this and making investments, of course, disclaimer: this is not financial advice for anybody. What should they do?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think my path was obviously not so generalizable, because I specialized in finance during my studies, and I did my internships at banks, and then I went
Mm-hmm.
for like fintech company building and helped set up investment funds. So I had access to certain expert knowledge, and took a lot of time to understand how different financial products work or what the implied risks are. So, and I also helped like write license applications at the regulator. So this really was
Yeah.
like one of the most valuable learnings for me. So that was very hard, especially when you're new in the industry. But to really dive deep into this topic, I think was the best investment of my time, because it
Mm-hmm.
didn't only pay me a salary at the end of the month, but it really helped to be able to make an assessment for my financial retirement, personal retirement planning, and to not just follow the standard offerings that maybe your country has or the standard products. But for example, I started in equities, sales and trading, stocks, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really interesting. But by now, I'm not the best or good in equity or stock trading, because my interest is now with blockchain technology. I can make a much better risk assessment on a crypto project than on an equity, although you would say it's the more risky asset
Yeah.
class, right? But within
Yeah.
this asset class, it's easier for me to even detect a low risk activity. So, and I think you should really follow a bit what you're passionate about, but also then dive deep. And I think it's really worth uh, investing some time into this, because it then also gives you some autonomy. And if you are able to generate a passive income early on, that makes you not only more independent as an individual, more independent from your family or from a partner or spouse, but also makes you more free in how you invest your time. What job do you want to work, or how do you want to spend the 24 hours every day, right? Like, does every hour that you spend, does it have to be for a salary paying employment job, or can you take on more risk for something that has maybe like a bit more self-starter component and is a bit more high risk, but more rewarding and fulfilling for you, right? It helps you
Mm-hmm.
make these choices. And without giving like direct investment advice, I think Web3 offers great financial products and are investable, although like the general asset class is risky. So I wouldn't just go for gambling with tokens. That's also not what I do, or just NFT flipping. I mean, there are people that
Mm-hmm.
are good at it, right? But
Yeah.
there are also many solutions, especially for women. Let's say you're in parental leave, you're actually quite busy. You can't, or you don't want to have a full-time job, but you still want to make use of your funds and generate an income. So when you have set up your own node at home, what you can already do without being a developer, with like a bit time that you invest into understanding how at home node works, then you can actually stake on a chain that has like a low stake value and already generate like really attractive yields, let's say between 5 or 15%, which is really big in compared to the interest rate that you get when you park your money in a savings account or in like a mutual investment fund. And there are great opportunities for women to become more financially independent with blockchain-based solutions.
I think that's a great point you made, because when you invest your time in learning something, it's also helping you in the long run, because a lot of times people just want to have an advisor and give them a cut, but it's not really, you're not learning the skill, and whenever you pay a percentage, it's like such a bad decision on your profits, but you think you're getting an expert to do this. So yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, but it also requires blind trust, right?
Yeah.
If you can't make your assessment your own. And I think we have learned in the last 20 years and in the recent months even more that we can't blindly trust any bank or regulator, not even the most basic concept of fractional reserve banking, with banks being able to use the funds that you give to them and then they gamble them away and they keep the yield, but you have the risk. This is something, it's a concept. Many people don't even think about the risk that it has to park your cash at a bank and everything goes bust if you have like a bit more money that is protected by a state. And I think, that's really worth to spend some time to understand, even if you hire someone to manage, but to be able to control them and not needing to blindly trust and being at risk.
Yeah, no, that's like actually, that is one of the important takeaways from this podcast, I feel. So I have one more question and then we'll go to rapid fire. So we are in 2023. What is exciting for you right now in the Web3 space? What are your future plans? And what is it that people should reach out to you for?
Yeah. So I think we have really reached a state where like the solutions that have been developed are qualified to replace certain legacy infrastructure. So I'm really excited to see like how this year further develops in terms of adoption of financial service providers to adopting to like truly permissionless technology. Because just what we just talked about, the critiques about fractional reserve banking or self-sovereign accounts, self-custodial accounts, right? Like I think they are really disruptive. And I'm keen to see that we can mitigate certain risks, get higher consumer protection by blockchain technology, but also, as I just said, democratizing access to wealth-creating products is huge. And I think we can even integrate deeper with the real world, like with real-world assets and financing real-world assets. In different fields, it can be carbon offset projects, right, that get their pre-financing, not only carbon credits, but really, supporting the solutions of problems at their root and cause. It's massive that we have reached this level where we can really connect to the real world and not only have like Ponzi schemes or a closed shop for cyberpunks, but solve problems in everyday life. Yeah,
I hope so. I hope so. That's the future we are looking for. Okay, so are you ready?
yeah.
Okay.
The fire.
So, what's your morning routine, Romina?
yeah, I think following a very strict routine helps me start my day very relaxed. So I start with like a lot of water before I drink something else than coffee, a healthy breakfast, and also some sports. I try to cycle in the morning to drop my daughter at daycare or to work, and I think that's has the most vitalizing effect and it's good for your immune system. So I can recommend.
Oh wow, this is like the most active morning routine somebody has shared on this podcast. So I'm really proud of having a guest with this. What's your like favorite productivity tool or hack that helps you in managing tasks?
I would say the Pomodoro technique, where you
What is
set
that?
like certain times. Let's say
Time
you set a
boxes.
timer for 30 minutes, and then within this time you have like this timer running, and then after 30 minutes you take like 5 minutes break.
Mhm.
It really helps you to stay focused and efficient and not lose time with checking your emails or WhatsApp or whatever, and
Yeah.
self-control of apps that really prohibit you to intuitively update the next infinity pool like crypto, Twitter, Instagram, you name it.
Yes, yes. No, I completely agree. And then what's like one skill that you are super glad you learned in your life? I mean, it doesn't need to be a professional skill. It can also be like a life skill. It can be sports. I don't know.
Wow, that's a tricky one. Hmm. Yeah, I think I do love working with Excel, even if we have so much more convenient solutions and apps. I think that like mastering such a tool or knowing which functions can help you solve complex problems or break down information and data in a meaningful way is great and helps you get insights, makes you
Yeah.
independent from other people. No matter if you're an artist or whatever, you can always use Excel.
Yeah, I think I need to
Compare.
learn that. Okay, this we ask everybody. If you had the opportunity to have dinner with a personality in Web3 crypto, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Oh, that's tricky.
Yeah.
I think I would. Okay, I say something super obvious. Vitalik Buterin. And I think one question that I really always wrap my mind on is why with this EIP 1559 proposal that like to burn ETH, why it's not steered for public goods funding.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
very
Why
specific.
so much ETH gets burned. And I think, if the big mission of Ethereum is public goods funding, why don't we, steer more ETH towards public goods? But we burn it. I mean, I get like the whole inflationary concept and so on, but it's still something that I often think about. And it's a philosophical question, but also crypto economic fascinating.
Yeah, that's a nice question. And this is the last one. What has been your biggest FOMO moment in crypto till now?
FOMO, like
Yeah, like you were
excitement.
like, oh my God, I hope I was into this or I knew this or, I was a part of this.
Yeah. I guess what I missed was the Gnosis ICO.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, and I mean, there were great things. We were directly sitting here in Berlin, and then you're like, okay, how did I get this, several months after I'm such a laggard?
Okay.
Yeah, and good to
Yeah.
see they still exist, but yeah.
Yeah, and they're doing great, right? I think they're just like these silent dark horses of like projects in
Yeah,
Berlin.
great project.
Yeah.
Definitely some of the thought leaders, but I hopped on the train fairly late.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Romina. I think this was like so much fun and getting to know
Yes.
you even better. This is the first time we've actually spoken like one on one for so long. And thank you for coming on this podcast. And everybody who listened, thank you. Please subscribe.
Yeah, it was great to chat with you as per usual, obviously. But yeah, good to spend some quality one-on-one time speaking about crypto.
Yes, thank you so much. And I wish you all the best for your future projects.
Thank you.